The Hnat Khotkevych Ukrainian Bandurist Ensemble is a vocal and instrumental Ukrainian folkloric performing ensemble in Sydney, Australia. It was founded in June 1964 by bandurist Hryhory Bazhul and since May 1971 was directed by Peter Deriashnyj. Origins. At the end of World War II, bandurist Hryhory Bazhul emigrated to Sydney, Australia, where he continued to perform for the Ukrainian community, having had performing success in a number of bandura ensembles in Germany during the post-war years. He was keen to establish a similar ensemble in Sydney, where he had settled on completion of his immigrant contract. In 1952, Bazhul advertised in the Free-Thought Ukrainian language newspaper in an attempt to locate like-minded individuals. 2 years later he befriended vocalist Pavlo Stetsenko and began to teach him to play bandura. Over the next 4 to 5 years another 6 individuals joined the group and began to develop a bandura technique and repertoire. In time, this group of singer-bandurists began performing, initially in Sydney, and then in Melbourne, to enthusiastic audiences. To mark the 100th anniversary of Taras Shevchenko's death, the group gave a series of concerts in Sydney and Melbourne and also produced a recording of 4 songs from the repertoire. By 1963, after some 39 rehearsals, 5 individuals of adult age and various levels of musical and vocal ability worked diligently to create a 17-song repertoire. This group had to overcome numerous difficulties related to the establishment of a bandurist ensemble in Australia, such as manufacturing instruments, the procurement of suitable strings, tuning pegs and tuning keys. All these posed insurmountable problems. The development of repertoire was also an obstacle, since no one in the group had suitable experience in arranging vocal works, as was the problem of duplication of musical scores. Repertoire collected by Bazhul from various sources was initially used, and gradually all the other problems were overcome by sheer effort, which testifies to the tenacity of this ensemble and its founder. Then unexpectedly personal difficulties saw some of the members leave, and now finding itself vocally incomplete, the quintet ceased its activities in February 1964. New generation bandurists Hryhory Bazhul turned to the younger generation, and in June 1964 he began to teach the first younger generation student, George Work, the Khotkevych-style bandura. Gradually more young individuals of student age took to learning the difficult art of the bandura minstrels. The attrition rate, however, for the young inductees was high, since there was no peer group to take encouragement and inspiration from. With the support of the Ukrainian Scouting movement and the conductor of the Ukrainian choir Boyan Vasil Matyas, young scouts began to learn to play the instrument privately, and a new generation of bandurists formed the Khotkevych Ensemble. In time the small group made numerous independent performances and also in many occasions accompanied the Boyan choir under the direction of Vasil Matyas. The new youth ensemble also included female participants. By 1970 some 19 students had embarked on learning the art. However, a core group of some 7 students remained and became known as the Hnat Khotkevych Bandurist Ensemble. They became the backbone of the ensemble for the next few years. Hnat Khotkevych had taught Hryhory Bazhul to play the Kharkiv-style bandura back in Ukraine, and as a mark of respect Bazhul chose to give this new ensemble Khotkevych's name. As the group's popularity grew, the ensemble became the moving force for the development of bandura art in Australia. It became evident that a formal school for learning bandura art in a central location with easy access to public transport needed to be established. Up until 1968, most new students were taught privately by Hryhory Bazhul at his residence in Fairfield West. new direction. After moving to Sydney from Newcastle in 1966, Peter Deriashnyj contacted Hryhory Bazhul in July 1967 to pursue studies with the bandura, specifically the Kharkiv style of bandura. Deriashnyj joined Bazhul's small group of 5 bandurists in November 1967 and encouraged the existing members to include vocal study into the weekly practice routine. Bazhul supported this proposal and elevated him to concertmaster. His first act was to bring all instruments to a concert standard by the renewal of older rusting strings and repairing of cracked instruments. Throughout 1968, the group worked diligently at combining 4-part vocals accompanied to their own bandura playing. A specific concert repertoire was selected and new bandura parts were written with a mind to the development of vocal and instrumental skills. The first independent concert took place in March 1969 in Wollongong and was dedicated to the Ukrainian bard Taras Shevchenko. This concert was later repeated in Sydney. The new repertoire, including the vocal performance of the ensemble, had an effect on the young Ukrainians in the audience, and under Deriashnyj's direction the group attracted talented individuals and continued to expand its repertoire and playing technique. Challenging 4-part choral vocals accompanied by 4 bandura parts, first and second Khotkevych Bandurist and first and second Chernihiv Bandurist, became the norm. From 1970 the ensemble toured the eastern states in Australia, continually performing at community functions, historic anniversaries and numerous folkloric and ethnic festivals throughout Australia. In March 1971, 10 bandurists with bassist Auguste Dyke gave an important concert in Newcastle dedicated to the bard Taras Shevchenko. At this concert a men's group and a women's group each performed 3 songs from the new repertoire, as well as combining for the full ensemble performance 14 items. The one negative issue to be exposed was a serious disagreement between the performing members as to who had voting rights in financial or performance matters. Of the many festivals the ensemble took part in, the most renowned was the Shell National Folkloric Festival held in the Sydney Opera House from approx. 1976 to late 1980s, when eventually the festival ceased activities. The ensemble's performances at the National Folkloric Festival were enhanced by the participation of its interstate members. In 1972, with donations received from caroling during the Christmas period and from individuals throughout Australia, Deriashnyj established the Sydney School of Bandura, which was located at the Ukrainian Central School in Lidicum. The funds were used to buy 3 or 4 banduras, which were then used to introduce the 10 to 15-year-old generation to the art of bandura. Students of the School of Bandura were able to study in both the Kharkiv style and the Chernihiv style. However, since Kharkiv banduras were difficult to obtain and more expensive to produce, the more plentiful and relatively inexpensive Chernihiv-type banduras began to predominate. The Sydney School of Bandura, however, was the only one in the diaspora to teach and propagate the Kharkiv style. With due consideration for his state of health, Bazhul transferred the leadership of the ensemble to bandurist Peter Deriashnyj in May 1971. This change did not sit well with some of the bandurists that were still wrestling with membership voting issues, let alone accept a new leader. The result being that the ensemble lost 4 experienced members in that year. The new ensemble, showing so much promise, found itself vocally incomplete. At this crossroad the previous group ceased its activities. The 4 who left were also vocally incomplete and did not continue continue as a separate group. Undaunted, Deriashnyj and the remaining dedicated bandurists began to regroup over the next 3 to 4 years. An experienced and talented group of singer-bandurists was formed and they aspired towards a professional level of performance. All the while Deriashnyj gave weekly tuition to the younger students attending the Bandura class at the School for Bandura in Lidcombe. All the hard work paid off. In November 1975, the ensemble, together with the students of the Sydney School of Bandura, gave a concert entitled In the Footsteps of the Minstrels. The younger students astounded the audience by playing 2 parts in the Bandura accompaniment and singing in 2-voice harmony. Peter Deriashnyj, a bandurist and craftsman of banduras from Newcastle, also performed works that he learned from minstrels in Ukraine during the mid-1920s. Apart from a varied repertoire of Ukrainian folk songs, the ensemble showed the versatility of the bandura by including in its performance contemporary non-Ukrainian songs adapted and arranged by Deriashnyj. 500 Miles, Mr. Tambourine Man, and A Horse with No Name. This concert had a great positive effect on the Ukrainian younger generation in Sydney. The high quality of the performances and the new repertoire attracted many new students to the group. The numbers of students at the Sydney School of Bandura grew to the point where the ensemble's committee could no longer cope with the added administrative burden, and a parents' committee was established. The Khotkevych Quartet. In June 1974, finding itself somewhat vocally incomplete, the ensemble could not celebrate its 10th anniversary with a concert. Instead, a low-key social event took place. Unfortunately, experienced singer-bandurist Hryhory Bazhul was given a teaching position in country NSW, but simultaneously, a young university student, Peter Deriashnyj, with a bass voice showing great potential, began to study the art through private tuition from Deriashnyj. Working enthusiastically through 1975, the group developed a good blend with the voices of the 4 existing members: Leonila Babchenko Deriashnyj, Lydia Deriashnyj, Peter Deriashnyj and Peter Deriashnyj. In Jan. 1976, the quartet's performances came to the attention of recording technician Peter Deriashnyj after a performance at the Canberra International Folk Festival. Deriashnyj suggested the ensemble consider recording its repertoire, especially any fresh compositions or arrangements. The ensemble embarked on recording an LP with some 12 songs from its repertoire. After some 14 months' work, the master tape was accidentally erased and recording began afresh, but with a higher performance standard and much more instrumental and vocal precision, and eventually in 1978 the LP entitled Bandura and Song was released for sale. The members of the quartet were Leonila Babchenko Deriashnyj, Lydia Deriashnyj, Peter Deriashnyj and Peter Deriashnyj. The quartet toured Australia with concerts and performances, selling its LP to audiences in Perth, Western Australia, Hobart, Adelaide, Melbourne and Geelong. All Australian Bandura seminars, the concert tours and the sales of the LP Bandura and Song had a significant effect on Bandura enthusiasts in Melbourne, Adelaide and Canberra. Ensembles in these towns that were already in the making renewed their efforts and began an active concert performing career. The banduras for these ensembles came from Ukraine and were of the Chernihiv type. Some were even equipped with mechanisms that enabled the rapid changing of the key to which the instrument was tuned. This permitted the performance of more interesting and challenging bandura works. In 1981, under the initiative of the musical director of the Sydney School of Bandura, Roxolana Michelot, a federal organisation was established and registered known as the Federation of Bandurists in Australia. The organisation's mandate was to unite the growing number of bandurists in Australia and to share information. A grant was received from the Australia Arts Council to organise a bandura seminar and to pay for a special guest teacher and performer from the USA. The seminar took place at Sydney University in January 1982 with Julian Kaitasti as guest tutor and lecturer. 38 bandurists from around Australia participated, with the final concert being recorded by SBS television. In January 1984, another seminar was organised by Dr. Igor Yakubovich from Melbourne's Leisure Ukrainian Bandurist Ensemble and Peter Deriashnyj, where some 25 students from South Australia, Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland took part. At this seminar, a bandurist association called Khotkevych Ukrainian Kobzarski Seminars in Australia was formed by students present. Then in January 1985, again under the initiative of the Khotkevych organisation, the largest of seminars took place in Sydney with some 35 bandurist students attending. 1985 to 1994, the Khotkevych Folk Ensemble years. In June 1984, on the occasion of the 5th anniversary of the suspicious death of Ukrainian contemporary composer V. Khotkevych, the group took part in a remembrance concert in Sydney where many of the younger generation musicians, singers, instrumentalists also took part. The success of this concert saw the founding of the Khotkevych Folk Ensemble by Peter Deriashnyj. For the next 10 years, the Khotkevych Bandurist Ensemble worked as an instrumental support ensemble, effectively forming a choir with bandura accompaniment, a bandura cappella. In the following years, this powerful choral instrumental combination saw concert performances in Brisbane, Newcastle, Sydney, Canberra and Melbourne. The bandura ensemble still performed as an independent group, but the combination with the four-part choral vocals of the Khotkevych Folk Ensemble was the high watermark for both groups. At this time, much of Deriashnyj's attention was directed toward the Khotkevych Folk Ensemble, so the bandura group's assistant director, Peter Chocola, took on the cappella master role, managing and organizing rehearsals. Membership. Members of the all-male adult group Hryhory Bazhul, Edward Kulchitsky, the Vasyl Onufrenko, Pavlo Stechenko, Stepan Kavelia, Pavlo Dyneka, Pavlo Dyachenko, Leonid Denisenko. Members of the new generation Khotkevych Ensemble: George Wauk, Andrew Tesliuk, Bohdan Huzij, Slavko Shijan, Volodymyr Motika, Leisure Bilash, Peter Deriashnyj, Lydia Tindyk, Stephanie Adamovska, Bohdan Brak, Lydia Deriashnyj, Kiev, Chernihiv Style, Nila Babchenko, Deriashnyj, Petro Chokula, Michael Dmitry, Juraj Chomiak, Alex Dindyk, Stefan Wasilik. Notable students of the Sydney School for Bandura: Victor Michelot, Kiev, Chernihiv Style,